I'll tell you something I don't usually admit out loud, at least not without a cup of strong coffee in my hand and a long stretch of fence line to lean on. There are moments in a man's life when the quiet he's worked so hard to build gets ripped open like an old feed sack, spilling everything messy and unexpected right onto the dirt. And that's exactly what happened the summer the folks from Ridgewood Crest moved in next to my farm, bringing with them shiny cars, manicured dogs, and a brand new HOA president who believed the sun rose just to illuminate her personal kingdom. Now, I've lived my whole life out here in Red Hollow, where the land rolls like the slow breath of a sleeping giant, and the mornings smell like dew, cedar, and machinery that's older than I am. My dad built this farm with hands that never stopped moving, and when he passed it down to me, he didn't give a long speech. He just slapped the hood of my old crop duster, Ruthie, and said, "Keep her flying straight, son." And that was plenty. Ruthie's a 1979 Air tractor. Yellow, stubborn, loud, and loyal, kind of like an old hound dog with wings. We've spread fertilizer across thousands of acres and saved more harvests than I can count. But I swear to you, I never imagined she'd one day become the center of the biggest neighborhood scandal this side of the county line. The trouble started slow, the way a storm does when it's still just a dark smudge on the horizon. Ridgewood Crest popped up beside my eastern field like some kind of luxury mushroom. Big stone entrances, fountains, houses lined up like the teeth of a rich man's smile. I didn't mind it much at first. Folks can live how they want. But then Celeste Morgan arrived, sweeping into that neighborhood like a commander taking control of a newly conquered territory. She was the HOA president, and if anyone ever looked the part of woman who writes emails in all caps, it was her. I first saw her driving a pearl-white Lexus, the kind that probably got waxed twice a day, and stepping out in a matching set of pastel athletic where that looked allergic to actual exercise. Her hair was sprayed into a shape that could probably deflect hailstones, and every footstep she took said she believed dirt was a rumor, not a natural substance. 3 months after the neighborhood opened, I was out turning the soil in my southern slope, sun warm on my neck, mind on the simple rhythm of the tractor, when I crested the hill and saw a scene so bizarre I thought maybe I'd inhaled too much diesel. A full photo shoot. Lights, reflectors, fancy cameras, models draped over my grandfather's antique hay rake like they were shooting the cover of a perfume ad called Eau de Cornfield. And there she was, Celeste, waving her arms like a general directing troops. I killed the engine and walked over, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Afternoon," I said, trying to be neighborly. "Didn't expect a whole modeling agency out here." Celeste turned with a smile so tight it could slice cheese. "Oh, you must be the farmer," she chirped, like she'd discovered a talking barn animal. "We're just capturing some lifestyle photos for Ridgewood Crest's new brochure. Your rustic equipment makes a lovely backdrop." My jaw twitched, but I kept it civil. "Ma'am, this rustic equipment is private property, and that rake belonged to my grandfather." She blinked. "Well, don't be so fussy. This is for the good of the community. Rising tides lift all boats, even your—" She pointed vaguely toward my farmhouse. "Little canoe." Now, I'm slow to anger and slower to act on it. But something about the way she dismissed my land my family worked long before her neighborhood existed, lit a small fire in my chest. Still, I asked her politely to move along, and after some dramatic sighing, she ordered her crew to pack up, muttering about uncooperative rural elements. I figured that might be the last of it. Just a misunderstanding, right? But no, that was the first crack in the dam. Over the next few weeks, letters started showing up in my mailbox, passive-aggressive at first, then fully aggressive. Complaints that my rooster crowed too early, that my tractor was too loud, that the smell of manure offended the ambience. Someone even suggested I schedule my farm chores between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. to reduce sound pollution. Sound pollution. On a farm. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so relentless. Then came the thicket argument. I'd hired a guy with a brush hog to clear a patch of scrub near our shared fence. Overgrown, snake-infested, useless land. And Celeste popped up on her side of the fence like a prairie dog in designer sunglasses. "Mr. Hale," she called, "I trust you're not planning to remove that charming natural barrier?" Charming was one word for a pile of thorns full of ticks. "It's my property," I said gently, "and it needs clearing." "Well," she sniffed, The HOA regulations clearly state, "Your regulations don't apply here." Her eyes narrowed. She muttered something about community harmony and strutted off. 2 days later, I got a certified letter from an HOA lawyer threatening action under an obscure county ordinance about visual disruption. That's when I realized this wasn't just an annoying neighbor. This was a campaign, a slow, polite invasion. So I started keeping records. Photos, dates, times, deer cam footage of Ridgewood Crest residents wandering onto my fields like it was a public park. Teenagers trying to start a bonfire near my dry timberline. Dog poop on my hayfield. Everything went into a binder. Still, the storm hadn't broken yet. Not until the morning, I found a refrigerated catering truck blocking the access lane to my runway on the day I had a dawn flight scheduled. Not until Celeste, dressed in a cream pantsuit that didn't belong within 80 miles of dirt, told me, "Oh, can't you reschedule, Victor? We're preparing for the Ridgewood Summer Gala." That's when the dam cracked. And trust me, the river that came through was big enough to carry a plane. I stood there in the early morning light, fingers tightening around the rag in my hand, trying to decide whether I had truly heard her correctly or if daylight had warped her words into something too absurd to be real. But no, Celeste's voice had that crisp, bright tone she used whenever she thought she was doing someone a gracious favor, the tone of a queen decreeing from her patio throne. "Reschedule," she repeated, waving vaguely toward the truck like it was an unfortunate piece of scenery that had blown into her perfect tableau. "The caterers simply must keep the gelato cold for tonight." This space was designated as overflow parking. "Ma'am," I said slowly, suppressing the kind of laugh that means you're 2 seconds from losing your mind. "This is not overflow parking. This is my access road. To my runway. I have a job to do." She blinked, that stunned kind of blink no one ever does unless they've gone through life believing the world moves to their calendar. "Oh heavens, Victor, must you be so dramatic? Your crop-dusting little errand can surely wait. This event is important. It represents Ridgewood Crest's values." I felt something in me tighten, like a bolt getting its final crank before snapping. "My flight was scheduled at dawn," I said quietly, "because that's when the wind is calm and the bees aren't active. If I miss that window, it affects my client, my reputation, my income." She pursed her lips like I'd just described an inconvenience she couldn't be bothered to comprehend. "Well, that sounds like poor planning." And that was the moment, right there under the sharp blue sky with the engine of the catering truck rattling like an insult at my back, when I understood that Celeste Morgan was not going to stop on her own. She wasn't going to wake up one morning and have a revelation about boundaries or decency or how farms work. No, this was a woman who believed her world was the world, and everything beyond her spotless cul-de-sac existed only to serve the aesthetic and emotional comfort of Ridgewood Crest. "Move the truck," I told her, voice low and steady, "or I'm calling the sheriff and the tow company." The look she gave me, Lord, I'll remember it even when I'm old and half-blind. Pure disbelief, then offense, then a pink puff of rage blooming under her foundation. "You wouldn't," she hissed. "Try me." Someone, one of the caterers, I think, leaned in to whisper urgently in her ear. She shot me one last glare capable of melting asphalt and snapped, "Fine, move it. But this is not over." She stormed off like a chicken with a nail in its foot, and for a moment, with the morning sun stretching across my field, I felt the adrenaline settle into something sharper, something colder, a realization that if she wanted a war, she'd wandered right into the wrong man's land to start one. My buddy Frank, who once served on an HOA board elsewhere, had warned me about this type. HOA royalty, he called them. Their power's the size of a teacup, but they swing it like a broadsword. He told me the only way to deal with them was with proof, or humiliation. Something undeniable, something that echoed. And wouldn't you know it, not 3 days later, Ridgewood Crest delivered me the perfect opportunity wrapped in glossy cardstock, like a gift straight from the arrogance gods themselves. I opened my mailbox and found a newsletter. Ridgewood sent them to all neighboring properties to foster community integration, which is a polite way of saying, join us or observe us from afar and know that we are better than you. This issue advertised an upcoming picnic and professional photo session for the Ridgewood Crest annual lifestyle calendar. The location? Red Hollow Overlook. My overlook. My hill. My oak tree. My grandfather's antique hay rake. the same spot where they had trespassed for the earlier photo shoot. And this time, they printed it right there, future site of Ridgewood Crest Elegance. I laughed. I genuinely laughed. It almost sounded like barking. The kind of laughter you do when someone cuts you in line, then demands you apologize for being in their way. They weren't even hiding the trespassing anymore. They were advertising it. I circled the date, Saturday, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., with a red pen and taped the newsletter to my fridge like it was an invitation to a duel. And then, slowly, an idea sprouted. A mischievous one. A daring one. A petty one, wrapped in justice. It started with a simple observation. The wind in late summer always sweeps across my west field toward the east ridge around mid-morning. A steady 10 to 15 miles per hour breeze, strong enough to carry the scent of fresh-cut hay or other, more powerful aromas. Then I looked at Ruthie, resting in the hangar, her yellow paint faded but proud, her hopper washed clean after the last job. I walked a slow circle around her, feeling the weight of an idea solidify, connecting my knowledge of wind drift, aerodynamics, and organic fertilizer into something wickedly elegant. I knew exactly what I was going to do. Over the next few days, I gathered supplies. 50 gallons of fish emulsion, thick as sin and twice as smelly, another 50 gallons of seaweed extract the color of old coffee, and 50 gallons of water. Normally, I dilute the stuff heavily before spraying it on my crops. It's potent, but harmless, and it does wonders for soil biology. But when mixed at half strength, let's just say it wakes up the nose. I blended the mixture in a big tank behind the barn. The smell wafted out so strong, even the crows abandoned the rafters. My son Matthew came home from college and stepped inside the shed, took one sniff, and staggered back like he'd been hit in the face with a mackerel soaked in gym socks. "Dad, good Lord, what is that? Did something die in here?" I grinned. "Just giving the neighbors a real country experience." "You're insane," he said, although he couldn't stop smiling. A genius, but insane. He wasn't wrong. The night before the event, I loaded the mixture into Ruthie's hopper, secured every bolt and panel, and laid out my flight suit like I used to before big dusting jobs. Except this time, instead of protecting my crops, I was protecting my sanity. Saturday morning arrived like a blessing. Clear skies, perfect breeze, birds chirping. It would have been peaceful if I didn't know exactly what was about to unfold. Around 10:30, I walked up to my field's ridge and peered through binoculars. Ridgewood Crest's residents had already begun arriving. SUVs gleaming like polished stones, families walking with wicker baskets, women in sundresses the colors of sherbet, men in pastel button-downs. And in the center of it all, Celeste Morgan, dressed head to toe in lemon-yellow linen, looking like she'd been plucked straight from a magazine about lifestyles of the dangerously entitled. A string quartet tuned their instruments near the oak tree. Photographers set up tripods. Children twirled on my grass like it was a theme park attraction. And their cars, half of them were parked on my side of the old fence again. I felt that cold, satisfying sensation of knowing justice was not only coming, but coming from the sky. At 10:55 on the dot, I zipped up my flight suit, climbed into Ruthie, and turned the engine. She sputtered, coughed, then roared to life, her propellers slicing through the morning air. I taxied down the runway, every bump under the wheels echoing through my bones, then lifted off, climbing into that endless stretch of blue. From above, the Ridgewood crowd looked like a spilled bag of pastel candies. They even waved at me as I circled once, thinking I was giving them a friendly flyby. Celeste actually lifted her champagne flute. I lined up the first pass along my property line and opened the sprayers just a crack, enough to look like normal fertilizing work. Then I banked, looped back, and prepared for the second run, the one angled perfectly so the wind would carry the mist right across their little gathering. My thumb hovered over the nozzle switch. "Here we go, Ruthie," I murmured, and with one smooth motion, I opened the sprayers wide. A fine brown mist arced out behind me, catching the sun like a shimmering veil, then drifting sideways exactly as the wind charts had promised. Slow, graceful, inevitable. By the time I pulled up and circled away, the reaction below was instant and operatic. The quartet's music died mid-bow stroke. People gagged. Someone knocked over the charcuterie boards. Kids started crying. The photographer ducked under his reflector like it would save him. And Celeste, oh, bless her heart, She stood perfectly still in her yellow suit, hands out to her sides, eyes wide, like she'd just been baptized into a religion she did not sign up for. I didn't linger to admire the chaos. I just angled Ruthie toward home and landed smooth as silk, heart steady, mind quiet in a way it hadn't been in months. And then I waited. I didn't wait long. I had barely finished rinsing the dust off my boots when I heard the gravel on my driveway scream under the weight of tires moving way too fast. I didn't need to look to know who it was. There's a particular kind of fury that travels through the air before a furious person even steps out of their car, and Celeste Morgan carried enough of it to power a small county. Her pearl-white Lexus skidded to a stop, and the door flew open like it had been kicked from inside. She exploded out of the driver's seat in a cloud of perfume, fury, and lemon-yellow linen now speckled with dark stains that did not come from the fruit. 2 HOA board members trailed behind her, looking pale enough to pass for ghosts. "Victor Hale," she shrieked, her voice cracking like a whip dipped in vinegar. You malicious, reckless monster. You attacked us. With poison." I looked up from my boots as calmly as a man checking the time. "Poison? No, ma'am. That was organic fish emulsion and seaweed. Perfectly safe. Good for plants. A little strong on the nose, sure, but—" "Don't you dare," she snapped, jabbing a trembling finger toward me. "Pretend this was an accident. You flew right at US. I flew along my property line," I corrected gently, "like I do every month. Wind can be tricky. Drift happens. You'd know that if your event hadn't been set up 50 yards inside my fence." One of the board members gagged again, hand clamped over his mouth like he was preparing for a second wave of horror. Celeste looked like a tea kettle seconds from bursting, face turning shades no dermatologist would approve of. "I am the president of Ridgewood Crest, and I will not be spoken to this way." We were appreciating the landscape. "My landscape," I said, without permission. She sputtered. Actually sputtered. "It was a community event. On my land. We thought. We always use that area. And I have deer cam footage of you doing exactly that." I cut in, still calm as a winter pond. "Today included." The words hit her like a slap. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out but a strangled sound of rage. "Why you will hear from our lawyers," she finally managed, voice shaking so hard the words wobbled. "This is environmental assault, property damage, emotional distress. Our string quartet is traumatized." I wiped a fleck of mud, real mud, off my sleeve. "Well, Celeste, your lawyers are welcome to swing by, but they might want to review the legal definition of trespassing first." Silence fell, heavy, awkward, and entirely mine. The 2 board members exchanged a look that said they wanted to dissolve into mist and never return. Celeste's rage evaporated into something small, something brittle, something that told me she knew she was cornered, but her pride wouldn't let her admit it. "This isn't over," she whispered, pointing weakly at me, though she no longer had the force behind it. "Oh, I think it is," I replied with a friendly smile. "But if not, I'm sure the sheriff will be happy to help us sort it out." She made a noise like a tea kettle giving up on life, spun around, scrambled into her Lexus, and tore down my driveway, so fast she nearly clipped my mailbox. The 2 board members followed her, windows rolled down, probably hoping fresh air would fight off the lingering scent of fish-based justice. And just like that, the driveway was quiet again. No shouting, no pastel community righteousness, just the sound of wind moving through my fields. For the first time in months, I felt peace settle into my bones. The fallout arrived in waves. Sheriff Kincaid stopped by 2 days later, under the pretense of checking a reported odor disturbance. He stood outside the barn, sniffed the air once, then looked at me with a glint in his eye. "Windy weekend, huh?" he said. "Sure was." He smirked. "Funny thing about wind. Hard to predict. Harder to prosecute." Then he spent 10 minutes admiring old Ruthie and left without writing a single report. Word spread through Red Hollow like wildfire. Folks who had battled their own HOA nightmares shook my hand at the feed store. Old Mrs. Delaney brought me a peach cobbler for bravery. My mechanic offered me a free oil change for community service. Even the mailman couldn't stop chuckling. But the real shockwaves hit Ridgewood Crest. Turns out not everyone enjoyed being drenched in eau de fish. Some residents blamed Celeste. Others blamed fate. But enough blamed the HOA leadership that within a month, meetings were held. Voices were raised. Fingers were pointed. People questioned why their supposed sanctuary from rural chaos kept stumbling into scandal with the farmer next door. And after one particularly heated emergency meeting, so I'm told, Celeste resigned for personal wellness reasons. I drove by 2 weeks later and saw a moving van in her driveway. Her Lexus was gone. Her posture was slumped, and her famous helmet of hair, once impervious to humidity, seemed to have lost its will to stand upright. It's funny, not in a cruel way, but in the way life sometimes has a dramatic sense of humor. Her replacement, Arthur Pennington, showed up at my door with cookies and an apology so sincere it almost felt like a magic trick. "We want to start fresh," he said, "and we want to stay on our side of the fence." And you know what? They did. They fixed their broken split-rail boundary. They put up signs politely reminding residents not to trespass. They even planted a row of maple trees facing their side, which Arthur called a visual buffer that no HOA lawyer will ever argue about. Life settled back into its old rhythm. Barnaby crowed. The tractor rumbled. Ruthie dozed in her hangar until the next flight. And sometimes, when I'm out dusting the wheat in the soft gold light of late afternoon, I see Ridgewood residents walking their dogs on their side of the fence, raising a hand in a friendly wave. I wave back, because mercy is easier to give when justice has already made her visit. But every now and then, when the wind shifts and carries a faint, salty tang from the west fields, I wonder if Ridgewood Crest still remembers that day. If the story still circulates in hushed tones at their backyard barbecues. The day the farmer with the old yellow plane taught them the difference between a postcard version of the countryside and the real thing. And if someone new asks what happened, I hope someone there has the courage to tell the story honestly, about entitlement, boundaries, respect, and what unfolds when you push a quiet man too far. So now I'll put the question to you, the folks listening out there. Did I go too far? Or was that the kind of justice people only dream of delivering to a pushy HOA? Tell me what you would have done. Tell me your HOA horror stories. And don't hold back. I've heard it all. And trust me, the internet needs your truth.